Jesus freak here. I'm on the opposite side of the street from usual because got the road blocked off because I was planning to come through and to give it a second run over from when they resurfaced it about a week ago. Honestly, ain't much going on. Though, judging by the fact that the short time I was drinking orange pop instead of caffeinated pop, I did feel a little bit more tired. You know, they say for some people caffeine works backward. For years I didn't really notice any real difference from caffeine and no caffeine. I do think it has a little bit of an effect. I mean, I'm already kind of dead and dealing with, Angel constantly running me out of bed because she wants that spot at the foot. Or wanting me to overload her food dish even more than it is. Cats. That I have, had sleeping issues. Anyway. There's a few people who probably follow me in other places might be familiar with some of the places I might post screenshots of projects I'm working on. It's not really important enough to share here until I'm a little further along. But I know I got someone here who's always bugging me. You worked on any retro computing stuff lately? You done any retro freak stuff? And I can actually say, yeah, I have, although sort of a weird way. I had the idea to try to write something that worked on a whole bunch of different computers. Kind of like, I don't know, SDL for retro computers. If you don't get it, don't worry. Nothing's important here. But basically, that I can split the program up into the part that handles actually doing stuff and the part that handles, interaction with the user. The first part can be the same on every system, but the second has to be rewritten. This idea of splitting it up into two parts and, this layer of abstraction, it's nothing new. If you're familiar with MS-DOS did the same thing. Windows even does this. There's actually a version of Windows NT 4. Someone actually created, I think his handle is Ryrie, Not spelled like Riri, the Bible guy, but he came up with this way to run. He came up with this way to run Windows NT 4 natively on a G3 Macintosh. Now, if you know anything about G3 Macintoshes, they don't have the same CPU as PCs. They're not Intel based. They're based on an IBM CPU, basically an ancestor to the one used in the PlayStation 3, the Wii, and the Xbox 360. But Microsoft actually developed Windows NT for a system called the Prep that IBM was working on. PowerPC reference platform, I think it meant. And someone managed to get it so it run on a Macintosh. Of course, it doesn't run actual Windows applications run on a PC. You run Windows 3.1 stuff. You need special software to run anything else. But what they did was they wrote the abstraction layer. And everything else just runs right off of completely stock, unmodified Windows NT 4 installer CD. So the idea of using an abstraction layer so you can have the same thing running on completely different systems is nothing new. Just you don't hear about it too much because there's a lot of, homogenization in the computer world since the early 80s. But that's what I'm doing. And I was actually learning something new. I've never written code directly for X window that didn't actually use an abstraction layer. Usually this has been SDL. But here I am, I'm writing code for X window. And I'm using libx11 or xlib directly. And once I started figuring things out, I'm like, this really isn't that much harder. Other than, having to keep track of handles for the system itself and for the display. Than SDL. I mean, X is an abstraction itself. In fact, it's a rather interesting abstraction coming from the mid-1980s, something that runs the same whether you're running it on a local machine or over the network by design. And I mean, it's not much of a thing nowadays. Back then it was. I'm like, maybe I can figure out a few things after this. Figure out how to do stuff directly for Windows. Don't have to use SDL there. Program for Windows 3.1. Maybe start, OS 2. Having the abstraction layer means, I just write the important part once, and then I get the back end stuff separate for each system.
Wait.
And I can reuse the back end. For example, I write a lot of emulators, and these types of programs, that all they need is their main window. Something that emulates a monitor and a keyboard. And that has to be, tweaked for everything it's running on. If it's running on DOS, it has to use one set of code. If it runs on Windows, it has to use another. If it runs on Linux, another. And if it runs on BSD, the same code for Linux would probably work just as it is. So, that was the idea, write some code once, some code multiple times, and if I write it multiple times, I can use it multiple times for other code. That's a stupid idea nowadays. Everyone's using either Windows or OS X. Most of us aren't using Linux. I am, but I'm weird. But, when you do this kind of stuff, if you're in unfamiliar territory, you learn stuff that way. I'm 44. I'm not going to say, that I've stopped learning. That I never learn anything new. In fact, I'd argue, your life starts to end when you stop, learning new things. We're always, we're always figuring out new stuff. If you're in a cocoon, so to speak, you're never learning anything, you're probably liable to have mental problems earlier than, keep exercising your brain. Maybe that's why my dad's doing as well as he is, 86 years old and as well as ever, from what I can tell. Anyway, Jesus freak out.